Kody's attorney stood up at last, eager to save his client's reputation. Your Honor, these tapes are not complete. They are pieces of conversations. Mr. Brown's words have been taken out of context. But Judge Reynolds held up a hand. The jury will determine the weight of the evidence. For the time being, it is admissible. Kody leaned back in his chair, his eyes white-rimmed, his wrath substituted for a glimmer of fear. The prosecution continued with photos. Extravagant buys made right when the wives said they couldn't make ends meet. A new vehicle. High-end vacations. Receipts for jewelry. All of them leading back to Kody's accounts. Christine's lawyer's voice sliced like glass. While these women lived on budgets to feed their kids, while mortgages were unpaid, Mr. Brown spent like a king. That is not leadership. That is exploitation. There were gasps in the gallery once again. The wives had sat stunned in silence before, but now their pain was vindicated by hard proof. Kody, trapped, erupted once again. He banged his fist onto the table. This is a witch hunt. They're bitter, they're angry, and they want to punish me for decisions they made too. You all knew what this life was. You all knew what it meant. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through the rage. His eyes flashed to Robyn, as if imploring her to rise up and defend him, to save him as she always did. But Robyn sat inert, tears streaking her face, her silence more incriminating than any witness. The air in the room was thick. Every gasp was laborious. Every motion electrified. The reporters couldn't take notes fast enough. The witnesses couldn't turn away. Judge Reynolds then hunched forward, his tone even but unyielding. Mr. Brown, stop. If you can't keep yourself in line, this court will intervene. The gavel fell again, and the courtroom was silent. But it was not relief. It was silence following an explosion. The smoke still present. The evidence had been exposed. Documents, tapes, testimony, photographs, and all of it bore witness to the same tale. Kody Brown was not the innocent patriarch he professed to be. He was an abuser of trust, a manipulator of those around him, a builder of his empire on deceit. And for the first time, all of them, his wives, his kids, the judge, the jury, the world, beheld it for what it was. The courtroom atmosphere seethed with betrayal, rage, and incredulity. And Kody sat, pale and shaking, seeing his kingdom slipping from him, piece by condemning piece. The weight of the evidence hung in the courtroom like a smudge after a blaze. The wives had testified, the lawyers had brought forth condemning papers, and even the children's words had been read aloud. The air was heavy, thick, as if the whole room were waiting with held breath for what was to come. It was Kody's turn. Slowly, reluctantly, he got up from his chair. His shoulders slumped, but he squared them with forced resolve, running his hand down the front of his suit. He tightened his tie, a nervous habit rather than an indication of calmness. For the first time since trial's commencement, he was less the charming patriarch America had beheld on their television screens, and more a man cornered. He cast a fleeting glance at the wives, sitting together like a phalanx. Their gazes, hard, weary, unwavering, collided with his with icy stillness. None of them broke contact. Focusing on the judge, Kody cleared his throat. Your Honor, he started, his tone bearing the same cadence he'd employed for so many years in front of cameras. I have given up more than anyone here in this family. I've borne the weight of leadership, of giving, of dressing, and feeding and protecting 18 children. I've been misjudged, demonized, portrayed as the villain, when all I ever attempted to do was keep a fractured family together. His words had a desperate whine to them, an attempt to rewrite the narrative playing out before him. I made choices, he went on, striding back and forth across the floor, because someone had to. When you're trying to keep several families whole, when you're balancing mortgages, bills, and the prying eyes of the world looking over your shoulder, sometimes you make tough decisions. Decisions other people don't grasp. Decisions other people don't appreciate. But I did it for the family. Christine slowly shook her head, cursing softly. Not for the family, for yourself. Kody continued, feigning not hearing. I am not perfect, but I am not a thief. I am not a villain. I have been the backbone of this family for decades. Without me, none of this would even exist. Without me, there is no Brown family story. The gallery murmured uncomfortably. Some nodded empathetically. Others rolled their eyes, unimpressed. But Christine's lawyer was already standing, her eyes blazing with determination. Mr. Brown, she snapped, we've listened to your speech. Now we will hear the truth. Kody bristled. She walked up to him, holding a piece of paper in her hand. Is it true you sold houses without the knowledge of your wives? Kody's jaw clenched. He looked at the judge, then at the jury, then at the pile of papers sitting atop the evidence table. His voice broke as he responded. Yes, but it was for the good of the family. Christine's attorney did not blink. She edged closer. So let me get this straight. You sold property, legally owned jointly with your wives, without their signatures or permission. Yes, he admitted, his tone dropping. Gasps of shock spread throughout the courtroom. The attorney's voice became more pointed. Is that true, Mr. Brown, that you channeled money into individual accounts to which only you had access? Silence. Kody's mouth opened, but nothing emerged. His eyes flashed toward Robyn, as if pleading for support, but she looked down, refusing to meet his eyes. The silence was louder than any possible response he might have made. Christine's attorney seized upon this. Your silence speaks volumes. The records indicate thousands of dollars missing. Deposits into private accounts. Spending big while your wives struggled to stay current on bills. Is that leadership, Mr. Brown, or control? Kody's chest rose and fell, fists clenched at his sides. He struggled to find the will to counter, but the walls closed in. Finally he broke. His voice rose, high-pitched with desperation. They're painting me as a villain, but they all knew what they were signing up for. He turned, gesturing wildly at the wives. You knew. Every one of you knew. You signed up for polygamy. You signed up for sacrifice. And now you want to rewrite history because it's convenient. The words reverberated in the room, off the gleaming wood and marble panels. His voice was not filled with power, but with cracks. Cracks of terror. Cracks of surrender. Christine gazed at him, her face softening for an instant. It was not pity. It was recognition. Recognition of the powerful man she once followed. The man who held their lives in his grasp was gone. In his stead was a shattered figure, grabbing frantically for control he no longer possessed. Janelle leaned in close to Christine and spoke in a hushed tone. He's falling apart. Meri's lips twisted into the faintest of smiles, her gaze fixed on Kody as if to say, this is the man we let govern us? This is the leader we trusted. And Robyn, tear tracks streaming down her cheeks, stared at her lap. She had stood up for him longer than any of the others, but even she could now discern the truth. Kody slammed his hand on the table, his voice breaking once more. I gave you all. I worked this family while you critiqued me from the sidelines. And now you stab me in the back for the world to see? The judge held up a hand, his voice over the din. You will calm down, Mr. Brown, or this court will calm you down for you. Kody stood frozen, his chest heaving with great gulps of air, sweat leading along his brow. For the first time, the courtroom witnessed not the haughty patriarch, not the larger-than-life character from TV, but a man who was trapped by his own actions. His frantic defense had fallen apart, and in the eyes of his wives, there was no sympathy anymore. Only the cold pleasure of seeing a man made to confront the truth he had evaded for so long. The courtroom was quiet, the type of quiet that makes the air thick in your chest. Papers were scattered across the evidence table, photographs and deeds still radiating on the screen above the judge's bench, ghosts of Kody Brown's errors that wouldn't dissipate. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, his expression somber. His voice broke through the silence with the force of thunder. This court has weighed the evidence, the testimony, the papers, the tape. Mr. Brown, you are guilty of financial impropriety. Restitution will be ordered. The words hit like a lightning bolt. Gasps rose from the gallery. Reporters, spectators, even strangers who had gathered to see the spectacle. Pens moved rapidly, recording the historic fall of a man who had once posed as invincible. Across the table at the plaintiff's side, Christine's hand darted out and clutched Janelle's. Their gazes met, the tears welling up, but these were tears of triumph. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest disappeared, the shackles of silence shattered. Meri reclined in her chair, eyes shut as if she'd been waiting a lifetime, holding her breath, and could now blow it out. A soft smile brushed her lips, not of happiness, but of unloading. And then Robyn, the wife who had been with Kody the longest, the one whom everyone thought would never turn, let out a soft sob. It wasn't the sob of a woman who had lost a husband, but the sob of a woman who had lost an illusion. The blinders had been pulled off her eyes, and she could no longer ignore the reality in front of her. Kody's response was prompt and crushing, his face gone white, his body falling forward in his chair, as if the words themselves had killed him. The man who had dominated his family with pride and iron hand, the man who pranced across television screens nationwide, was gone. What was left was a shell of a figure, stripped of power, stripped of dignity. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. He shook his head, his curls falling into his eyes. "No, this isn't right. This isn't justice. This is betrayal." He gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I did everything for them. Everything, and this is how they repay me. With lies and accusations, with betrayal." His words fell on deaf ears. The judge raised the gavel, his tone firm and final. "Restitution shall be shared among the plaintiffs. Properties shall be restored where feasible. This court is adjourned." Bang! The striking of the gavel rang out like the last nail hammered into a coffin. The Brown family tale, one once colored as an isolated polygamist utopia, feted on national TV, had passed the point of no return. There would be no turning back. No cameras could spin this outcome into something consumable. Christine stood first, standing tall, her eyes sparkling with earned freedom. She reached out her hand to Janelle, who stood up beside her. Meri stood with them, her head held high, dignity finally hers. And then, almost reluctantly, Robyn stood up too. She dried her tears, but instead of walking toward Kody, she followed the others. For the first time, the four women walked together, not as sister wives, but as survivors of betrayal, united not by love, but by justice. The scene was strong, indelible. The gallery murmured as they went by, the blink of photojournalists' cameras lighting up their faces like a cortege of fact from the darkness. Kody sat motionless behind them. He didn't stir. He didn't utter a word. He gazed upon the vacant space where his wives had once stood, his eyes bulging, his chest laboring with convulsive breaths. The courtroom cleared out around him, but he stayed, a man vanquished not only by law, but by his own deeds. At that moment he wasn't merely isolated in the courtroom, he was isolated in life. Christine and Janelle emerged into the hallway, surrounded by microphones and cameras that buzzed like vultures. Christine squared her chin, her tone steady, but firm. "This wasn't about revenge," she said to the media. "It was about truth. It was about safeguarding ourselves and our children. We will move ahead, stronger." Janelle nodded, agreeing forcefully. "This isn't the end of our story. It's the start of a new one, without him ruling us." Meri's language was cutting, definitive. "For years I was silenced. Today I spoke, and I will never again be silenced." Robyn, still shaking, said only, "I wanted to believe in him. But sometimes love blinds you to the truth. I see it now. We all do." Their words would resound on headlines the following morning, but the picture spoke louder still. Four women, walking abreast, taking with them the man who had once dominated them. Within the court, Kody finally stood. His pace wavered as he made his way towards the judge's bench. His voice strained. "Your Honor, please. I can mend this. I can make it right. Don't let them take everything away from me." But Judge Reynolds didn't even glance up from his notes. "Court is adjourned, Mr. Brown. You've had your chance." Kody's pleas dissolved into the empty chamber. The reporters were gone. The wives were gone. The judge was gone. All that remained was a man staring at the ruins of his empire. For years, Kody Brown thought he could dictate the reality, that his charm could warp the world, that his wives would stay with him no matter how much he wandered. But now, taken down from his pedestal, debased, shamed and disloyal, finally he came to understand. The Brown family saga was done. And for Kody, his life story, as he knew it, ended not in celebration and togetherness, but in the bang of a gavel, and the footsteps of four women away in freedom. The courtroom was quiet, the sort that makes your chest heavy with air. Documents were scattered everywhere on the evidence table, photos and deeds still radiating on the screen. Above the judge's bench, ghosts of Kody Brown's missteps that would not dissipate. Judge Reynolds hunched forward, his expression somber. His voice broke through the quiet, with the authority of thunder. This court has considered the evidence, the witness accounts, the documents, the tapes. Mr. Brown, you are guilty of financial impropriety. You will have to make restitution. The words hit like lightning. Gasps swept through the gallery. Reporters, observers, even strangers who had gathered to see the spectacle. Pens scribbled wildly, recording history's fall of a man who had once seemed unassailable. Across the table from the plaintiffs, Christine's hand flew out and took Janelle's. Their eyes locked, tears brimming. But this time they were not tears of despair. These were tears of triumph. Finally, for the first time in years, the weight on her chest was gone. The silences of bondage shattered. Meri slumped back in her chair, eyes shut as if she had been without oxygen for decades, and could at last breathe out. A wistful smile played about her lips, one of relief, not happiness. And Robyn, the longest-standing wife of Kody, the one that everyone thought would never turn, let out a soft whimper. It wasn't the sound of one who had lost a spouse, but the sound of one who had lost a dream. The facade had been pulled away, and she could no longer deny reality in her face. Kody's response was swift and ruinous. His face went white, his body collapsing into his chair, as if the words themselves had killed him. The man who once dominated his family with pride and iron authority, the man who marched on TV screens nationwide, was no more. In his place stood a hollow shell, bereft of authority, bereft of dignity. "No," he whispered, his voice shaking. He shook his head, his curls dropping into his eyes. "No, this isn't justice. This is betrayal." He was holding the edge of the table so hard his knuckles whitened. "I did everything for them. Everything, and this is how they pay me back. With lies and accusations, with betrayal." His words were lost to deaf ears. The judge raised the gavel, his voice firm and final. "Restitution will be shared between the plaintiffs. Properties will be reclaimed where possible. This court is dismissed." Bang! The ringing of the gavel crashed like the final nail into a coffin. The Brown family tale, once colored as a special polygamist utopia, basked in the glow of national TV celebration, had come to this. There would be no return. No cameras could turn this finale into something to swallow. Christine stood in front, her back straight, her eyes aglow with hard-won liberty. She reached for Janelle's hand, who got up beside her. Meri rose to join them, her head high again, dignity at last regained. And then, in a near reluctance, Robyn stood up too. She dabbed at her tears, but rather than moving toward Kody, she joined the others. For the first time the four women moved in tandem, not sister wives, but betrayers, united by justice, rather than love. The scene was strong, indelible. The gallery murmured as they walked by, the click of photographers' cameras lighting their faces like a parade of truth from the darkness. Behind them Kody remained immobile. He didn't stir. He didn't utter a word. He gazed out at the space where his wives had sat, his eyes bulging, his chest pumping in and out in shallow breaths. The courtroom cleared out around him, but he stayed. A man vanquished not only by law, but by his own behavior. At that moment, he wasn't only alone in the courtroom, he was alone in life. Christine and Janelle emerged into the corridor, where microphones and cameras descended like vultures. Christine held her chin high, her voice steady but firm. "This was not about revenge," she said to reporters. "It was about truth. It was about being able to defend ourselves and our children. We will go on, stronger." Janelle nodded, emphasizing, "This isn't the end of our story. It's the start of a new one, without him telling us what to do." Meri's voice was cutting, definitive. "For years I was silenced. Today I spoke, and I will never be silenced again." Robyn, her voice still shaking, just stated, "I wanted to believe in him, but sometimes love blinds you to the truth. I see it now. We all do." Their words would ring out in headlines the following morning, but the photograph spoke even louder. Four women, walking abreast, departing the man once their ruler. In the courtroom, Kody stood up at last. His feet were unsteady, as he walked towards the bench of the judge, his throat parched. "Your Honor, please. I can repair it. I can make it right. Don't let them take all from me." But Judge Reynolds didn't even glance up from his notes. "Court is adjourned, Mr. Brown. You've had your chance. Kody's pleas dissolved into the empty chamber. The reporters were gone. The wives were gone. The judge was gone. All that remained was a man staring at the ruins of his empire. For years, Kody Brown had thought he could dictate the narrative, that his charm would warp reality, that his wives would only follow him no matter how lost he got. But now, powerlessness, dignity, even loyalty stripped from him, he at last confronted reality. The Brown family story was done, and for Kody the tale of his life as he had known it came to an end, not with marriage and togetherness, but with the crash of a gavel and the departure of 4 women walking into freedom. The courthouse doors burst open with a loud creak, the noise echoing down the marble corridor like a clang of warning. Hours of shouting from reporters on the street had turned into a maddening storm of speculation and judgment. Click, click. Camera shutters flashed with no pity as Kody Brown entered. He had dealt with cameras in the past, but never so intensely. This wasn't a Sister Wives red carpet premiere. This wasn't reality television, manipulated and edited to his liking. This was real, unedited reality. A courtroom where every choice, every falsehood, every deception would be picked apart in front of the law. For once, Kody's signature confidence was nowhere to be found. His footsteps stumbled, and his usually squared shoulders slumped beneath the weightless burden that heaped upon him. He smoothed his suit, a dark gray jacket that hung stiffly on him, as if it also would not yield to his command. His curly blonde hair, once the epitome of his free-spirited charm, lacked luster under the bright overhead lights. His eyes flashed left and right, looking for friends, for solace, but none. At his back, muttering thrummed like disturbed bees. Strangers, reporters, and onlookers who had not come for justice, but for spectacle. All wanted to witness the great patriarch fallen. And then his eyes locked onto them. Christine, Janelle, Meri, Robyn, the 4 women sat in a group on the other side of the room. They had been his partners, his cohabitants in an alternative lifestyle that featured in the headlines and attracted admiration and indignation in equal measure. They had stood up for him to the world before, remained by him on couches for interviews, smiled through agony in front of the cameras. But not today. Today, there were no smiles in common, no united front, no pretense of sisterhood. Shoulder to shoulder they sat. But it was not love that held them together now. It was rage. Christine's face was set with resolve, her eyes blazing with inner flame. She had once walked away from him, leaving heartache spanning years behind. But today she returned, not as wife, but warrior. Janelle's face was a picture of fatigue, laced with determination. She had never been one for drama, always the practical one, the voice of sense, the calm hand that attempted to stabilize chaos. But her forbearance had thinned. Today, she was not here to reason. Today, she was here to battle. Meri's lips were pursed tightly, her jaw set. For years she had been the outcast wife, the one who suffered humiliation, betrayal, and loneliness. But here, in this courtroom, she held her head high, her posture radiating defiance. And Robyn, the wife that everyone thought was always going to stay by Kody's side, was different now. Her eyes were puffy with tears, her fists clenched in anxious tension. She was conflicted, divided. But here, sitting not beside him, but opposite him, that betrayal hurt Kody more than any binding legal contract ever could. Kody's chest constricted. These were the women who had once crowded his life, his home, his narrative, and now, they regarded him not with love, but disdain. The voice of the bailiff shattered the heavy silence. All rise, all eyes in the room were on their feet as Judge Reynolds walked in. He was a tall, imposing figure with a serious face, his robe billowing as he sat down at the bench. His sharp, calculating eyes swept the room as a hawk scanning its prey. He pushed his glasses up, peered down at the documents in front of him, and then raised his eyes to the family seated before him. Case number 1175. Brown versus Brown, he stated, his voice echoing through the room, firm and consistent. This court is now in session. The words seemed to drift in the air like smoke from an explosion. Although everyone in the courtroom was aware of the reason they were present, hearing it verbalized made it have substance. This wasn't rumor or conjecture. This wasn't a plot for a TV show. This was reality. Kody's throat parched. He looked down at the table before him, his hands digging into the edge of a pad of paper. He wanted to appear strong, to emanate power, but his body had other ideas. He could sense the gallery's eyes piercing him. He could hear the scratch of pens on paper as reporters scribbled notes, already planning tomorrow's front pages. Kody Brown goes head-to-head with wives in courtroom battle. For the first time in years, he wasn't dictating the narrative. Christine shifted in her seat, her lawyer whispering something into her ear. She nodded slightly, her chin lifting as though preparing for battle. Janelle shuffled her papers, her eyes narrowing as she reviewed the evidence she knew would devastate him. Meri's arms were crossed, her gaze unflinching, as though daring him to look her in the eye. Robyn stared down at her folded hands, the weight of her choice written all over her face. The quiet in the room lingered, each passing second tightening the strings of tension. It was choking, intolerable. Even the judge stopped, allowing the weight of the moment to fall like dust on a battlefield. And then, with a stern rap of the gavel, he spoke. "It seems to me," Judge Reynolds went on slowly, "that this family has come to a breaking point. This is no longer a squabble over personal differences. This is a question of law, of property, of money, of betrayal." A whispered murmur ran through the room. Terms such as betrayal cut more deeply than any legal terminology ever could. Kody's head came up, his jaw clenching, his eyes blazing with something like fear and anger. He wanted to scream, to protest, to remind them all that he had been the one keeping this family together for years. But the gravity of the moment squashed his tongue, rendering him speechless. For so long, Kody Brown was the star, the voice, the storyteller of the Brown family. But now, he was a defendant like so many others, sitting before a judge, without his authority. And as the sound of the gavel disappearing into stillness, there was one reality that could no longer be denied. This wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a war. The silence that had greeted Judge Reynolds' opening remarks was shattered by the quiet scrape of Christine Brown's chair as she rose. All eyes in the courtroom turned to her. Christine had been everyone's image of the warm, caring wife, the smiling through discomfort one, the silent burden bearer for the family. But today, her voice quivered not with fear, but with resolve. "Your Honor," she started, holding on to the edge of the wooden table for support. "We are here because Kody betrayed us. Not only did he betray our love, he betrayed our trust. He manipulated the finances, sold off properties without our knowledge, and left us struggling while living in luxury himself." The words once shared in clandestine conversations behind closed doors, now boomed in the courtroom like indictments chiseled into stone. Christine's attorney slid a stack of evidence down the table, but Christine never took her eyes off Kody's face. It seemed as if decades of held-in pain were now spilling out. "For years I held my tongue. I trusted his words. I trusted that if I remained faithful, things would only improve. But the reality is, he was constructing his own dynasty while allowing ours to fall apart." Gasps echoed through the room. Pens scribbled madly across notebook pages, catching every detail. Christine slowly sat down, her hands trembling, but her face determined. Then Janelle appeared. If Christine had testified with the voice of the hurt, Janelle testified with the voice of facts. Cool, measured, unyielding, she stood up with an armload of papers, receipts, deeds, and bank statements. She placed them on the table one by one, each falling with a soft thud that packed more punch than any angry tirade. "This is no longer about heartbreak," Janelle replied, her voice firm. "This is about justice. These records indicate transactions done without our signatures, houses sold behind our backs, bank accounts emptied. He stole what he wasn't entitled to steal." She tapped her finger against one paper. "Look here, Your Honor. This deed shows my name, Christine's and Meri's, all listed as co-owners. Yet the sale went through with only one signature, his." The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses to read the lines. He frowned, the gravity of the claim settling on his shoulders. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening. Janelle's voice sliced through the room once more. "We trusted him to be in charge. Instead, he manipulated, controlled, and let us fight for crumbs. as he got to enjoy all of it we had built together. This is theft masquerading as leadership. The bite of her words hung in the air as she set the final piece of paper down and sat back. And then Meri stood. Her tone was not the same. Sharper, more intimate, as if a razor honed over years was waiting to strike. Her eyes slammed into Kody, her words cutting through the air. He shut us up for years, Meri stated. He instructed us to obey, to trust, to never question him. He taught us that loyalty equaled silence, and that silence equaled love. But not anymore. Today we talk. Today the truth is revealed. Her voice trembled only a little, but her look at Kody did not falter. You told me I was nothing. You embarrassed me. You left me behind while flaunting around with others. And yet you still demanded my loyalty. But loyalty must be earned, Kody. And you earned nothing but scorn. The room sizzled. Every sentence a punch. Every word a wound laid bare. But next was the most astonishing moment. Robyn. The courtroom held its breath as she stood. For years Robyn had been Kody's most stalwart defender, the wife who stayed when the others departed. Her taking his side had been a constant presence in his life, a solace for Kody, and maybe his only remaining bulwark. That bulwark was broken by her tears. Her voice was low, delicate, almost tentative. Even I can't pretend anymore, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears as they streamed down her face. He swore to provide for me, swore to love me, swore that if I stuck with him we'd create a secure future for our children. But he took it all away instead. He betrayed us all, including me. The words rang like thunder. Reporters gasped. Christine and Janelle looked at each other in shock. Even Meri, toughened by years of bitterness, seemed shaken for a moment. Kody's head jerked toward Robyn, a look of disbelief on his face. No, he shook his head, muttering, not you too. But Robyn's sobs cut him off. The picture was clear. All 4 wives, who were once tied to him, now joined together against him. And then it happened. Kody's anger exploded. His palm cracked against the fine-grained wood of the table, the sound of flesh meeting oak like a gunshot. His cheeks were flushed bright red, his eyes afire. Lies, he bellowed, his voice ringing out across the room. All of you, you betrayed me. Because I took a different course. This isn't betrayal. This is vengeance. You couldn't live with the truth, so you've distorted it. His words, once capable of bending wills, now fell flat. The women didn't flinch. They didn't cower. They didn't retreat. Christine sat with her hands folded tightly, refusing to look away. Janelle calmly rearranged her papers, unshaken. Meri's smirk returned, her silence more cutting than any insult. Robyn, still crying, buried her face in her hands, unwilling to even acknowledge him. The authority he had once wielded had evaporated, leaving him yelling into the vacuum, where obedience once resided. Judge Reynolds struck his gavel. Order. This courtroom is not going to turn into anarchy. But the harm was already inflicted. Kody had attempted to make their accusations a circus, to play himself as the wronged victim. But in the eyes of all who were witnessing, his tantrum wasn't the wail of an innocent man. It was the shriek of desperation of someone watching his empire crumble. The wives had spoken. They had accused. And for the first time, Kody Brown was by himself, the pressure of their words bearing down upon him like chains. The courtroom became silent once more, the accusations hanging there like smoke after a flame. Nothing would ever be the same. The courtroom was thrown into subdued silence as the attorneys rose, each with briefcases full of stacks of files, photos, and sealed envelopes. It was no longer about charges or tearful testimonies. Now the chill, irrefutable burden of evidence was going to crash into the room like a tempest. Christine's lawyer, a woman with poise in a crisp navy suit, stood up first. She dropped a thick binder on the evidence table. Its thud, the final shred of denial, clung to Kody's face. Your Honor, she started, her voice stern, we will prove, beyond a doubt, that Mr. Brown made repeated instances of financial malfeasance, manipulation and deception against his wives. We will show deeds, financial transactions, voice recordings, and testimony from members of the Brown family. Judge Reynolds nodded. Go on. The first display was shown on the courtroom screen. A set of property deeds. Each of them had several co-owners. Christine, Janelle, Meri. But signatures were absent. only one name was on the last sale papers. Kody's. Christine's lawyer moved closer to the judge. These properties were sold without knowledge or permission of the other owners. Profits of these sales were put into accounts none of the wives had access to. These are facts, not speculation. The gallery murmured in shock. Janelle stiffened. Her lips pressed firmly together as she lived the betrayal. The second exhibit, bank statements. Pages and pages of withdrawals, wire transfers and deposits into accounts in Kody's sole name. The lawyer for Janelle took over. For years Mr. Brown diverted family money into private accounts. Thousands of dollars, unaccounted for, unexplained, and not available to his wives. He said he did this in the family's best interest. But that's set out here in black and white. The sound of rustling papers filled the air as reporters scribbled furiously. And then came the most devastating evidence of all, the audio recordings. Christine's attorney pressed a button, and the courtroom speakers crackled to life. At first, only static. Then Kody's voice. "I'll sell everything if that's what it takes to keep control. They don't need to know. They just need to follow." The words cut through the air like a blade. The tone was undeniably his. The arrogance, the sense of entitlement, the iron fist wrapped in charm. Christine hid her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Janelle leaned forward, her voice breaking into a whisper that cut across the silence. "That's the real him." The room seemed to close in on Kody. Every eye focused on him. He leapt out of his chair, hands shaking with fury. "You can't take that and use it against me. That was taken out of context." He pointed an accusing finger at the judge. "You don't know what's going on. That was private." Bang. The gavel came down. Judge Reynolds' voice thundering above the "Mr. Brown, sit down. This is a court of law, not your TV show. You will play nicely, or you will be ejected." The tirade only intensified the incredulity surrounding him. Even Robyn, his erstwhile quiet champion, shook her head slowly, tears falling down her face. But the attorneys weren't done. The following exhibit was even worse. Children's testimony. Christine's attorney read from a sworn affidavit. One of Mr. Brown's older children remembers being told flat out, "Your moms don't have to know how I do things. I'm in charge here." Another affidavit showed that some of the children had heard disputes about missing cash, overdue mortgage payments, and Kody saying that appearances were more important than stability. The courtroom's vibe changed. What once seemed like a family squabble now appeared to be a masterfully staged hoax, brush-stroked with the words of not only wives, but children who'd survived it. Christine lifted her head, her eyes brimming, but her face set with anger. Janelle's fists clenched on the table. Meri never looked away from Kody. And Robyn wept silently, hurt as much as the others by the betrayal.